All right, so today we are going to completely tear down everything you thought you knew about language. I mean, we're talking about the hidden rules, the secret architecture behind every single word we speak. And we're going to do it by looking at the work of this incredible French linguist, Pierre Guiraud. So, yeah, get ready because this is going to be a wild ride.
Okay, so right out of the gate, Guiraud just drops this bombshell on us. Get this. The reader will learn that words have no meaning. I mean, what? That sounds absolutely crazy, doesn't it? If there's one thing we're sure of, it's that words have meaning. But trust me, this one, single, totally counterintuitive idea, it's the key that unlocks everything.
So, how on earth can that be true? I mean, how are we even talking to each other right now if the basic building blocks of our language are meaningless? Well, that's the puzzle, right? And that's exactly what we're going to solve together today. But to get there, we have to start by just shattering everything we learned about grammar in school.
So, according to Guiraud, the traditional grammar that was drilled into our heads in school, it's basically a house of cards. It's full of contradictions. In fact, he calls it a discipline without verification or sanctions, which is a fancy way of saying it's kind of just made up. And he lays out these really startling claims that just seem to defy all logic. Just take a look at this list. First, again, words have no meaning. Then the French conditional is a tense, not a mode. Okay, we'll get to that. And then our syntax ignores agreement. And finally, grammar is just this flimsy discipline. I mean, every single one of these statements just feels wrong, right? But Guiraud's whole point is that they're actually signposts pointing to a much deeper, much more elegant truth about how language really functions. Okay, so to untangle all of this, we've got to tackle the big one first, this illusion of meaning. Guiraud says we need to completely change how we think about words. Stop picturing them as these little boxes, each with a neat little dictionary definition tucked inside. Instead, you've got to see them as pieces on a chessboard, where their power comes from how they relate to all the other pieces. And this table really gets to the heart of it. You've got two totally different ways of looking at things. On one side, there's traditional grammar. It's all about rules, about correctness, about words having these fixed inherent meanings. But on the other side, you have structural syntax, and this is a whole different ballgame. Here, grammar is a living system, and meaning, well, meaning isn't in the word, it's created in the space between the words. So, Guiraud gives us two key concepts. The first one is sense. Think of this as the effect of meaning that you get in a whole sentence. Let's take his example. Un chapeau de paille, a straw hat. Okay, so the word paille just means straw. It doesn't mean made of this material. But when you stick it next to chapeau, or hat, a relationship pops into existence. Suddenly, the effect is a hat made out of the material straw. You see? The meaning wasn't hiding inside the word paille. It was created by the connection. Okay, the second big idea is valeur, or value. This is a bit different. It's all about a word's power to be opposed to other words. A word's value comes from everything it isn't. So if I say the book is on the table, the word on has a really high value. Why? Because I could have said under, next to, behind. There are tons of other options it's fighting against. But a word like of, book of poems, what are the opposites of? Not many, right? So it has low value. It's more of a grammatical tool. All right, this new way of thinking forces us to ask an even more basic question. Like, if meaning isn't really in a word, then what the heck is a word anyway? And this is where Guiraud really blows things up. He argues that our whole idea of what a word is just this old clunky definition we inherited from Latin, and honestly, it just doesn't work for languages like French, or even English. So, the traditional definition we all get is pretty simple. A word is a piece of language you can't split up. It's an indivisible little block. Seems straightforward enough, right? Well, think again. A super simple example from French just shatters that idea. In French, finiront means they will finish. Okay, that looks like one word. It's one solid chunk. But on finit means they have finished. It's basically the same verb idea, but look, you can actually split it. You can stick another word right in the middle, like ont enfin fini, they have finally finished. So is it one word? Is it two? Suddenly that neat little definition doesn't look so neat anymore. So if the whole concept of a word is shaky, then what is language really made of? What are the true building blocks? Well, Guiraud says we have to go smaller. We need to find the fundamental unit, the real atom of language. And he calls this tiny unit a monym. This is the real Lego brick of language. And there are basically two kinds.
You have the content bricks, the roots, like chant, which means sing. And then you have the functional bricks, all the little bits and pieces like the ending eons that tells you we are doing the singing, or an article like le.
And here's how it all stacks up. It's a hierarchy. You start at the very bottom with those tiny monomemes, the roots and the markers. Then those monomemes click together to build what we call words. Those words then group up into bigger phrases, what he calls syntaxe. And finally, those phrases combine to make a full thought, a complete proposition. It all builds up, layer by layer, from these tiny, fundamental pieces.
Okay, I know, that's all a little abstract. But this is where it gets really cool, because we can actually see the system in action. Let's look at a real-world example from French that shows how the whole structure of the language can shift and adapt when one little part of it breaks.
So check this out. It all starts with a simple fact about pronunciation. In spoken French, for the most part, the little s that you write on the end of a word to make it plural is silent. You just don't say it. Now, that might seem like a tiny little detail, but believe me, it sent a massive shockwave through the entire system.
And here is the problem that created. The word for bird, oiseau, sounds exactly the same as the word for birds, oiseau. So if the marker for plural has gone silent, how does the language deal with that? How does anyone know if you're talking about one bird or a whole flock of them? The language system had a critical job to do. It needed to mark the difference between one and many. The tool it had been using for that job, the sound, was now broken, so the system had to get creative. It had to find a new tool to do the same job. And this is the absolutely brilliant solution that the language came up with. The function literally moved. The job of showing something is plural got handed off to the little word in front of the noun, the article. The difference between singular and plural isn't in the end of the word anymore, it's in the beginning. This is perfect proof that language isn't some dusty old rule book. It's a living, dynamic system that solves its own problems. And once you start looking, you see this kind of hidden structure everywhere. Like, take verbs. We're all taught to think about past, present, and future. But Guiraud shows there's another layer, a deeper system based on what he calls aspect. Is the action ongoing or is it completed? That distinction, he argues, is actually more fundamental than just when it happened. And that brings us all the way back to one of those paradoxes from the beginning. The idea that the conditional isn't a mode for hypotheticals, but just another tense. He calls it the future of the past. And when you think about it, it makes perfect sense. If you say, she said she would call, the calling is in the future, but from the perspective of a moment in the past. It's not some weird hypothetical state. It's just another point in the timeline. So really, that's the big takeaway from all of this. That grammar book you memorized in school, that's not the real story of language. Language isn't a museum collection of fixed rules and definitions. No, it's a living, breathing ecosystem of functions and relationships that is constantly adapting, rebalancing itself, and finding clever new ways to get its job done. So I want to leave you with this challenge. The next time you have a conversation, try to listen with what Guiraud called naive eyes, or maybe naive ears. If all the rules we think we know are just a surface-level illusion, then what are the deep, invisible systems, the pushes and pulls, the hidden functions that are secretly shaping every single thing you say right now?